Chapter 17, A Red-Hot Lead. Night overtook Biff, Chubba and Muscles before they reached Jaraminka. All were tired. The going in the dark was rough, but Biff was determined to reach the town before they halted. "Another hour," Biff said, "and if we haven't gotten there, we'll hole in for the night." "Okay by me," Muscles answered. Chubba nodded his head. They didn't have to go for the full hour. Following a narrow path, no more than a rough goat trail, they rounded the side of a high-pointed hill. From far below their dangerous perch on the hillside, they saw lights. Hundreds of lights, flickering like candles in a breeze. It was a beautiful sight to come upon suddenly in the night. "Jaraminka," Biff said, and looked at Chubba for confirmation. "You're right, Biff. That's Jaraminka." "It's a lot bigger place than I thought it would be," Muscles put in. "It's in center of big, wide valley. Much good farmlands. Many rich peoples once lived here. It's nice in summer, not too hot." "How about the House of Kwang, Chubba? They have any properties around Jaraminka?" "Oh yes, Biff. Always in summertime, Old Lord and family go to Jaraminka. Old Lord have big place here. His big house still here, but Old Lord not own it anymore." "Chinese commies run him out?" Muscles asked. "You're right, Muscles. They take over. Now this place big, important outpost for Chinese army." "Why would the Chinese army have a large installation in such a wild, remote section of their big, sprawling country?" The answer came to Biff immediately. That big fenced-in construction job was not more than 10 miles away. That had to be the reason. Just what was being built, though, still puzzled the boy. "We'll bed down here for the night," Biff said, "and go into the town early in the morning." "Real early, Biff," Chubba said. "Soon as sun start rising, farmers go into town to marketplace, bring things from farm to sell. We go in with them. People think we farmers too." "How about me?" Muscles asked. "I don't look like a Chinese farmer." Biff laughed. "Anything but. You have to stay here, guard our camp. We go into town, find out things." "Okay by me. But say, be sure and leave me my pal." "Your pal?" Biff asked. "Yeah, my pal of protection. The spirit box." They all laughed, turned in and slept. Early in the grey of the morning, Biff and Chubba were on the outskirts of the village. A stream of solemn-faced farmers passed through the city's gate. Chubba and Biff attached themselves to the parade and entered unnoticed. Biff had reached a decision. If any member of the House of Kwang could be located, he felt now would be the time to use the green ring. Keeping his voice low, he spoke to Chubba. "Don't ask any more questions about Uncle Charlie, but find out, if you can, if there are any members of the Kwang family around here." "I catch, Biff. If any Kwangs around, Chubba will locate them." The boys wandered through the sprawling city. They made for the marketplace, always the center of the most activity. Going from stall to stall, Chubba made his inquiries. He told the persons he questioned that once he and his father had served the House of Kwang. Now, he said, in a sad, tearful voice, he was only a beggar boy. If he could only find one of the young lords, perhaps the lord would remember his father and give Chubba a helping hand. At mid-morning, Chubba hit pay dirt. He engaged in a long conversation with a young, slender Chinese. This Chinese was different from the broad-faced farmers, the stall-keepers, the uniformed soldiers who thronged the marketplace. His facial features were fine, his clothing cleaner and richer than that of those surrounding him. Biff watched Chubba anxiously. He saw his friend bob his head up and down in agreement. Then the two parted. Chubba rejoined Biff, motioned to him to follow, and Chubba led the way back to the gates of the city. Once outside, Chubba told Biff of his conversation. "This man I talked to, his name Chan Li, once he young lord of house like House of Kwang, not so big, not so rich. But House of Li and House of Kwang good friends. House of Li taken over just like House of Kwang. He hate government bosses." Biff felt himself becoming excited. This could be the lead they'd been searching for. Did you ask him if any members of the House of Kwang were still in Jaraminka? Chuba did. Chan Li say yes. He say he know many things, but he say he must be very careful. Cannot take us to where Kwang family in hideout unless we have proof we friends, not enemies or police spies. Biff's hand went inside his cloak. He felt for the ring. This was it. The ring would bring the good fortune it promised. What's our next move? We go back to where Muscle's hiding. Then, when sun stands straight up in sky over our heads, we meet with Chan Li. Where? Back in the city? Oh no, too much risky. Remember, on our way down to city, we come to little brook fed by spring? Biff nodded his head. We meet there. Come, we tell Muscles. Back with Muscles, the three held a council. Their plans depended on what they would learn from Chan Li. But how could Muscles be kept informed? It wouldn't do for him to attend the meeting. Maybe I could be there but not be seen, Muscles said. Any cover near the spring where I could hide? Maybe I could overhear what this Li character has to offer. I think so, Muscles. Come, we go down now and see. Not too long before sun stands straight up. Near the spring they found a heavy thicket where Muscles could conceal himself. When you're translating for Biff, raise your voice slightly, Chuba. Not loud enough to cause suspicion, but loud enough for me to hear. Let's have a dry run of that, Biff suggested. Muscles concealed himself in the thicket. Chuba talked to Biff in a tone slightly louder than normal. You hear all right, Muscles? Biff asked. You're coming through loud and clear, was the reply. How much time before noon? 10 minutes, Muscles called back. Chuba spoke to Biff. You stay here now. I go a little piece downhill, see if I can spot Chan Li coming up. Chuba left. Biff remained silent, not wanting to give Muscles' position away by talking to him any more. In a few minutes, Chuba returned. His face told Biff the story. He's coming. Be here real quick. Is he alone? He by himself. Good, Biff thought. If Chan Li acted suspiciously or tried any funny stuff, Muscles lay in waiting. Chan Li came into the small clearing around the spring. He bowed low to Chuba, then repeated the gesture to Biff. He asked who you are, Biff, Chuba translated. Tell him I am a friend of the House of Kwang. I seek their help. Interpreter Chuba spoke swiftly. He says he needs proof of this. He must be sure you are a real, true friend. It was now or never, Biff decided. He reached under his cloak and took out his keychain. Turning his back to Chuba and Chan Li, he took the ring off the chain. Turning, he held it out. Ask Chan Li if this is proof enough. The slender Chinese stepped forward. He took the ring from Biff's hand. He inspected it carefully, then replaced it in Biff's hand. It is the ring of the Ancient One, the old lord of the House of Kwang, he said to Chuba. When Chuba gave this information to Biff, his heart pounded with excitement. Now tell him, Chuba, that we come here to find my Uncle Charles, or to get any definite information as to where he is. Chuba's head went up and down. He spoke to Chan Li. Their conversation went on and on. Biff's anxiety grew. Chan Li's answer was all important. At long last, much to Biff's relief, the conversation ended. It was a solemn-faced Chuba who turned to Biff. He has told me many things we wanted to know. Well, what are they? What are they? Biff demanded impatiently. He says Sahib Charles is being hidden from soldiers by House of Kwang. What? Biff clapped his hands. He couldn't contain his joy. Tell me more. Chan Li says more, that Sahib Charles hurt self when plane came down. Biff's joyful feeling vanished. Badly? Was he hurt badly? No, not too bad, but enough to keep him from travelling. Now he all better. All is arranged for House of Kwang to help Sahib Charles get back to Burma. What can we do to help? Chan Li will take us to hideout place. We get Sahib Charles, lead him back to... Biff held up his hand. Wait. Biff felt there was still need for caution. He didn't want Chuba to mention the plan for the plane pickup. He didn't want him to reveal Muscle's presence. There was no way of knowing whether Chan Li understood English or not. Until they reached Uncle Charlie, it would be wiser, Biff felt, to hold back what little ammunition they still had. Ask him where is this hideout where my uncle is. Chuba turned back to Chan Li. He spoke rapidly. Chan Li replied and pointed in a direction north of Jaraminka. Just north of the city, in those foothills you can see from here. How long will it take us to get there? Biff was asking these questions for the benefit of the hidden muscles. An hour, says Chan Li. Maybe a little more, but not much. And is he ready to take us there now? Chuba again nodded assent to the question. Tell him, then, that we are ready to go right now. Chuba spoke to Chan Li. The Chinese replied with a deep bow and the sweep of one arm, as if to say, I lead, you follow. As if speaking to himself, but in a clear voice, Biff said, an hour there, an hour with Uncle Charlie, and an hour back. A bit more, perhaps. 4 hours at the most. Biff stressed the words, 4 hours. He hoped Muscles would understand. He hoped Muscles would know that if they weren't back in 4 hours, then something had gone wrong. With Chan Li in the lead, they headed for the distant foothills. Chapter 18. The House of Kwang. Muscles didn't move. He kept his eyes glued to his watch until 10 minutes had passed. Not until then did he think it safe to come out of his hiding place. He had overheard every word. He, too, had been thrilled at hearing that his good friend, Charles Keene, was safe. Going back up the hillside, being very careful to take the protection of all cover on the way, Muscles muttered to himself his admiration of Biff. Smart kid, that Biff, he said softly. He's not showing his whole hand. He wants to be shown first. Muscles looked at his watch. The hands pointed to 12:30. 4 hours, Biff said. That will make it 4:30. Muscles grinned. If they're not back by that time, Muscles is going to muscle in. Nothing was said for the first half hour as Chan Li led Biff and Chuba into the foothills to the north of Jaraminka. Chan followed a course which curved around the city. The city lay below them, about 3 miles away, nestled in the center of an oval-shaped valley, rimmed by hills. The growth on the sloping hillside was thick, but the path they traveled was wide and cleared enough for easy going. They made good speed. When they reached a point almost due north of the city, the path turned sharply to the left and the incline steepened. They puffed their way up the path, putting the city farther and farther behind them. After a particularly steep climb, they reached a level area. Looking ahead, Biff saw that the path came to a dead end against a low stone wall. Gaping holes in the wall showed that it had been a long, long time since any care had been taken of it. Chan Li came to the wall and scrambled over it. Biff and Chuba followed. Chan Li called a halt once they were inside the wall and standing in a thick clump of trees. Chan spoke to Chuba. Chuba interpreted to Biff. Chan say, we almost there. Must go most careful now. Ahead is old house, big house, once house of important family. Family all dead. Only evil spirits remain. People afraid of old house. Chan Li pushed deeper into the woods. Biff had no chance to voice suspicions that were growing in him. He felt that such a house must be known. But would the evil spirits keep authorities from investigating? Biff shook his head. He didn't like the situation. He couldn't tell exactly why, but his doubts grew stronger. True, the house was deep in a dense forest. It took quite a climb to reach it. It was a good 5 miles from the outskirts of Jaraminka, and there had been no sign of any other house on their path to reach it. The woods started to thin out. Biff could see they were coming to an opening. As they neared it, Biff saw the grey outlines of several buildings, linked together by a high stone wall. There was no sign of life. The buildings, low, sprawling, had an ominous, mysterious quality about them. The space between the woods and the house was just wide enough for what once must have been a moat. Chan Li led the boys to an arched opening in the wall, and they passed through it. Before them, Biff saw a large courtyard. A gravelled pathway led to the main door. 3 small pools were spaced on either side of the path from the opening to the house. As they neared the door, Biff sensed and felt the presence of someone behind him. He turned his head. 2 Chinese soldiers, each with a revolver in hand, had closed in behind the 3. Before Biff could raise his voice in protest or question Chan Li, the Chinese guide spoke. "Welcome to the House of Kwang." He entered the door. The guards moved up behind Biff and Chuba. There was nothing they could do but follow Chan Li. He led them down a long corridor. The corridor was lined with small rooms on each side. This may once have been the House of Kwang, Biff told himself, but there was little doubt as to what it was being used for now. The small windows in the center of the doors were barred. At several of the windows they passed, silent men stared out of the bars at them. At the end of the corridor, 2 more guards threw open a large, richly decorated door. Chan Li, a leer on his face now, bowed low, and with a sweep of his arm, ushered the boys through. The courtyard of the Ancient One, the old lord of the House of Kwang. He spoke the words in perfect English. In the center of the room, 2 men sat on high-backed throne chairs. One of them was richly dressed in a flowing robe decorated with red and gold dragons. The other man, much older, was in tattered clothing. A wispy beard waved downward from his chin. Both men wore tight-fitting skull caps. "Approach, my friend," said the richly dressed man. Biff and Chuba crossed the large room until they stood directly in front of the 2 men. On closer inspection, Biff saw that the speaker, who wore the rich clothing, had coarse facial features. His big, broad nose seemed to have been ironed onto his face. The other man, though poorly dressed, had a fine, proud face. He held his head high. His eyes, dimmed by the years, were the eyes of a frightened man, but a man who would face his fate without flinching. "You are seeking the master of the House of Kwang, I am informed," the younger man said. As he spoke, 2 men appeared from behind the chairs. One of them had but one good eye. The lid of the other eye drooped until the eye was shut. The Chinese of the Chicago Plain. The man turned on a triumphant smile toward Biff. "We meet again, Mr. Brewster," he said. "Silence, Mao," commanded the richly robed man. "You have, I am told, a ring with you, young man. A ring which indicates your great friendship for the House of Kwang." The smile left the speaker's face. He leaned slightly forward, and his next words were a stern, crisp order. "I'll take that ring. I am Ping Lu, master of the house." Biff reached into his pocket. He detached the ring and held it out in his open palm. Just as the richly robed man reached for it, the older man arose, bent forward, and snatched it. As he did, Ping Lu, with a sweep of his heavy arm, knocked the old man back into his chair. He seized the old man's hand and pried open his fist. He took the ring. The old man spoke. He spoke in Chinese. Ping Lu laughed as the old man poured out a stream of words. "You may interpret for your American friend if you wish," Ping Lu said, addressing Chuba. "The Old One is the real master of the House of Kwang," Chuba translated. "He is called Teo Kwang, and is oldest of the remaining Kwang family. The ring is his. He is much angered that it is now in hands of richly dressed man." Ping Lu cut in. "True, all true. Once this old fool was the master of this house. Oh yes, this was one of the many houses owned by him. But I am master of this house now. It is used by me and my government as a place where we entertain," he chortled at the word entertain, "our more important guests. And Teo Kwang, though a doddering old fool now, once held sway over this territory and still thinks he has much influence." Teo Kwang spoke again. Again Chuba interpreted. Ancient ones say still many sons and nephews here. Say for us not to be afraid. Of course there is nothing to be afraid of, Ping Lu said. I hope you will enjoy your stay with us. How long do you intend keeping us prisoners? Biff asked. Prisoners? Let us say guests. Of course, we will have to see that you are protected at all times. That is why it will be necessary to have you kept in a room guarded by 2 of my strongest soldiers. You ask how long will you be staying with us? Biff nodded his head. That, young man, depends on the cooperation I expect to get from you in a matter of great importance. What is it? Biff asked. You will hear in due time, but first a few days' rest here with us should, I think, do much to show you the absolute necessity of your cooperating. Biff didn't want to think of what the few days' rest might mean. Tell me this, Ping continued. Your paying us this visit surely wasn't only because of your friendship with the House of Kwang. I seem to remember being told of other inquiries your clever young friend made on your behalf. He motioned towards Chuba as he spoke. Biff decided on a show of boldness. There was nothing to be gained by cowering before this self-important official. You're right. I've come here in search of my uncle. His name is Charles Keene. So, well, perhaps I can be of assistance to you. Perhaps the ring you brought with you from so many thousands of miles away will bring you good fortune. Biff felt like the mouse the cat was playing with. Is he here? Biff demanded. Ping Lu clapped his hands. The Chinese with the bad eye, whom he had called Mayo, came to him. Ping Lu leaned over and spoke softly into Mayo's ear. Neither Biff nor Chuba could hear what was said. Mayo left the room. Ping Lu turned to Chan Li. He had been standing just behind the boys during the conversation. You may go now, Chan Li, and your reward will be given you as you leave. Chan bowed and turned towards the door. Teo Kwang, the Ancient One, spat out a single word as Chan left. Biff looked at Chuba. He called him traitor, Chuba said. Ping Lu leaned back in his chair. He clasped his fat hands over his bulging belly. A smirk of satisfaction was stamped on his face. The rasp of a door opening on the right side of the huge room caused Biff to turn his head sharply. Through the door, prodded from behind by the gun barrels of 2 soldiers, walked Uncle Charlie.